There's big-time expectations on the Bayou this season. Kickoff is just around the corner, helping us break down and preview the upcoming 2025 season. Good friend of mine, good friend of the show, and co-host of To Your Point, Blake Ruffino of AYS Sports, one of the best in the business when it comes to talking all things LSU Tigers, not just football, baseball, and basketball as well. Blake, what's going on, man? I appreciate you taking the time, and like I told you off air, excited to chat with you as always, but excited we are finally talking football on the field. Kickoff's almost here.
Yes, LSU reports to camp on Tuesday, the players report to camp on Tuesday. We will be out there on Wednesday, more than likely Friday, either Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So football is here. We got a football game on Thursday night football in the NFL. So we're here. So I am cautiously moaning inside of that we are here in football. And Chris, to be honest with you, for me, talking season stops Wednesday. Like brother, it's real now. Like there's no turning back. You can't go lift weights. You can't go, get more conditioning. It's over. It's time to go here. So if I'm not mistaken, everybody besides I think South Carolina or whoever plays on that Thursday night, I think reports tomorrow or camp starts tomorrow. So in the SEC, here we go. It's off and running.
Blake, really excited to talk about this 2025 season and specifically this football team with you. Before we do, though, if you don't mind, let's briefly look back at what went down in 2024 and how we got to this point. Tigers went 9-4 on the season, 5-3 in SEC play, beat Baylor in the Texas Bowl. Mm-hmm. We don't have to spend a lot of time here because, simply put, it was a disappointing season. Just your thoughts on the 2024 season looking back and how it plays into, I think, Blake, some of the pressures that obviously Brian Kelly and that entire program are facing going into this season.
If your minimal win total is 9 every year, then sign me up, I think, in some regards. Now, not 8 wins, not being 8-4, right? Like I don't think that – I think that's the minimal standard at LSU that you can go without getting fired. You can't do it in back-to-back seasons. But I think there were a lot of things. Chris, we talked about this time last year. A lot of people came into the season saying, oh, well, Jaden Daniels is out the door. Garrett Nussmeier's coming in. But I don't think people understood completely what that meant. I remember a conversation that you and I had a year ago of the narrative was, oh, LSU's going to be right where they left off. Can they fix themselves defensively? No, you have a first-time starting quarterback. And I think that was something that people needed to get behind and understand. Narratives can get out of control. It might be happening for Arch Manning at the current moment and a lot of these different quarterbacks. So we look at these situations and look at a year ago. Defensively, in some areas, you got better. You got better at stopping the run. You got better at defending the pass. You got light years better at getting after the quarterback. Chris, they were top 3 in the SEC in sacks a year ago. So there were some areas, but you didn't have the dudes. You didn't have the Jimmies and Joes. So now you feel like that you've gone out in the portal and gotten some dudes, some Joes that can really get after it. So I think that last season is a microcosm of what I think that people – look, there's 2 things. One, it's going to sound like I'm defending Brian Kelly on this, but let's rewind the clock. I think what we're learning about LSU at the current moment is we didn't understand how big of a rebuild it might have been with only having 37 scholarship players. And when Jaden Daniels walked through the door and they won the West, it was a little bit ahead of schedule, right? I think that's where we sit, and then you're kind of having to rebuild in a rebuild. So they went through a lot, and they had a lot of bad moments. They had a lot of really good moments. I think of the South Carolina second half. I think of the Ole Miss game. I think of so many different situations. But, Chris, there's a lot to clean up. I think that as I've said this over the last week, and just to bring it up here, I think LSU's got more question marks than the Riddler. This is Batman Beyond, and George Clooney is your Batman. It is Jim Carrey as your Riddler. There's more questions than there are answers. So I think that, look, there were some good things that you did, but there's a lot that you got to clean up to go to be better than 8-4. Now, Chris, the truth is that you could look at it and say maybe they shouldn't have lost to South Carolina. Maybe they shouldn't have lost to, or shouldn't have beaten Ole Miss. So those are a couple wins that could have gone your way, but maybe you should have beaten USC and beaten A&M. So a couple of different games go your way, a couple of games didn't. And really and truthfully, you're literally midway through the season against A&M last year, and you score a touchdown, and you're up 17-7, and a lot of people thought that LSU might be the best team in the SEC in that half. So after that, it kind of went by the wayside. I think depth was a problem. So kind of the rebuild, how do they look? They brought in a lot of personnel defensively. So it's going to be interesting to see. But look, in a recap, I've kind of flushed it in a way, because you can't go into this season talking about it because none of it matters. Of course, you got a brand new defensive line. You got a brand new secondary. You got 3 new receivers. You got 4 new offensive linemen. I mean, you tell me where they're at. So I think that's the main thing here.
Blake, I want to zero in on Brian Kelly before we talk about this 2025 squad coming into his 4th season. It's been a really interesting tenure for BK to this point. And you talked about too. And listen, a wise man once told me, and that wise man's name was Blake Ruffino, that 9-3 at LSU gets you fired after a few years of doing that. So to say, again, that there's a lot of pressure on this season is probably an understatement, if you will. You win the SEC West, like you mentioned, in year 1. You had that year with Jaden Daniels winning the Heisman, but you defensively had a historically bad defense, and that held you back from, I think, your true potential. Brian Kelly tells you to judge him in year 3. Well, year 3, you go 8-4 in the regular season. You lose another season opener. Obviously, the opener struggles are really well documented. And I feel like BK and, called for, the support of the LSU community. And whether he did or not, you guys obviously gave him everything he could ever need. They said this is the best roster he's had since he's been there. And I mean, again, the investment has been there. Look at all the guys they brought in from the portal. Now, is it the best roster? You and I can talk about that. Maybe it's debatable, but I'm curious, Blake, I would argue your feel on the pulse of the LSU fan base is as good, if not better, than anyone else being in that community and also just with your platform and your network. Thoughts on Brian Kelly, and how does the LSU community, the LSU fan base, feel about BK going into year 4? Is the pressure as immense as I'm making it out to be, or is he getting a little bit more leeway in this new era of college football?
I think there is a little bit of leeway, because I think the real people that know that BK probably wasn't given every single advantage that he needed in today's era. LSU repeatedly, and we have shows upon shows about this, would get cheap, and you just can't get cheap in today's game from a football perspective. $1 million for this kid is too much. No, it's not. I mean, basic reading would have told you, and basic knowledge of covering college football would have told you that you're about to pay some kids $1 million in TV revenue money. So I think a lack of understanding hurt BK on administration side of things. Chris, he's not a general manager. He's a head football coach. And so I don't think that that was necessarily beneficial to him. But, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of pressure because 1,600 people gave you money and you raised over $3.5 million, and you called them out saying, hey, we need support, and they gave you money. There's no excuses now. 0 excuses. So you can't go out there and ask for money and then say, hey, we're going to go get the best class. And then, Chris, you can't say this is your best roster and not go 10-2 at minimum. Okay? Because you've been 9-3 in the first 2 years. You went 8-4 a year ago, but you got to 9 wins in the bowl game. But you can't do that. I mean, let's just be honest. You can't say it's your best roster and then go out there and go 9-3 again. You can lose to Clemson. Doesn't mean that he's wrong. You better go 10-2. You better run the table. You can only have one SEC loss, which then, Chris, dictates if you only have one SEC loss, you're probably finding yourself in Atlanta, which a lot of people don't know if that's possible for this team, or some people think it is possible for this team. We're going to find out. But the pressure is immense because of the things that he said. I don't agree with him that it's his best roster, because at the end, it might be his best overall complete team. I don't know from a talent perspective it's his best roster. Chris, he had the Heisman Trophy winner and the Rookie of the Year in the NFL and a play away from going to a Super Bowl. He had 2 first-round wide receivers that led all rookies in receiving. And by the way, they're 2 top 60 players in the top 100 of the NFL. You had the number 1 draft pick at left tackle and the first offensive lineman taking the top 5 pick in Will Campbell. You're replacing 4 first-round picks, and you want to come in here and try to tell me that – I mean, Chris, what? I mean, like, I think defense – I think what he's trying to say is – as a complete unit, we are the best. That doesn't mean it's your best overall roster because you had some top-heavy talent now. So, by the way, on that defense in 2023, you had a second-round defensive tackle. You had 2 linebackers drafted. Chris, they had 10 people drafted that year. So you said it was scheme. Well, okay, well, you can only say it's scheme because you had 10 players drafted, 3, and technically 4 in the first round from that team. So, the pressure is immense. And I will tell you this. There's always been a concern of people and players coming in from the portal about culture. Culture is a bigger thing in football than, in my opinion, than any other sport. Because in baseball, there's 25 of you. I mean, you can work some things out.
It's an individual sport, too, more so.
More so an individual sport, right. So you can work through some things. Nobody's in the batter's box with you, with Danny Dickinson or Bear Jones or any of that. Chris, I have to rely, if I'm a center, on my guards if I want to be any form of relevant, ever. Like ever. It doesn't matter, ever. So your quarterback's got to be relevant on your offensive line as well. So I think that when you get to the situation of team culture, Jack Pyburn from Florida has come in here and set a tone. I got to be real with you. There's more intensity. Intensity doesn't lead to wins, but there's been more intensity and focus in this offseason than I think any other offseason under Brian Kelly, because I think that you've had some guys that have come in here who now have to prove a point. See, there's one thing if you go out in the portal and you bring in a guy that's, a top wide receiver and he's done it already. Berrien Brown, Jack Pyburn, Patrick Payton was called lazy. All of these guys that you brought in have a point that they have to prove. The thing here is I think it's raised the level of intensity so much that it's gotten Harold Perkins out of his shell, where you got Perkins and you have Pyburn miss a rep. Some things that I'm hearing, miss a rep in the weight room and watch what's going to happen. I'm not playing around. Like, miss a rep. You better get your hands up. I'm not joking around. Like, the intensity level is as high as it's ever been. Jaden was a leader by his actions. These guys are doing it by action, but they're also doing it by miss a rep. Go right on ahead and miss a rep. Watch what's going to happen to you. And I'm not saying they're fighting, but what happens there is, and they're not, I'm just saying what happens there is that the intensity level, Chris, of instead of getting 8 reps, I'm going to get 12 reps. Well, when it's 3rd and 1 against Bama on the road, that 12th rep is going to pay off. Okay? So I do think BK has raised the intensity because, Chris, let's just to be real with you, the intensity level from the fan base is at an all-time high in reference to his tenure. But I do think the intensity has been raised inside that locker room, bar none, especially on defense. So, again, in a unit, by the way, Darren Spring that dominated. So, we will see. I do think you're right. Last year I came in on your show and said, this is the biggest game of Brian Kelly's tenure so far, and it was in a lot of senses because now what was been the whole offseason has been talking about what? Can LSU win a game 1? Of course it is. Of course that's what it's going to be. Now you go into a situation, Chris, with the ACC champion and a team that some believe and people that we respect in this business who believe that Clemson's the best team in the country. So, yeah, it's at an all-time high.
Blake, let's talk this 2025 squad. I want to start first on the offensive side, and, of course, the conversation has to begin with Garrett Nussmeier, especially after Brian Kelly. Some pretty lofty expectations on Nuss at SEC Media Days when he said he's expecting a year 2 jump like a Jaden Daniels had. Obviously, the fan base talks of the year 2 jumps of Daniels and Burrow, and certainly you can kind of let your imagination run wild of what Garrett Nussmeier could do this fall. You mentioned the weapons he's going to have to throw to. Aaron Anderson is back along with Chris Hilton and Xavier Thomas, but you added some big-time pieces too. The speedster, Berrien Brown from Kentucky, Nick Anderson from Oklahoma, big-body dude on the outside that's going to boost that receiver core. At the tight end spot, you got Bauer Sharp, who also came in from Oklahoma. I know that's a guy you've talked about a lot, been high on. Also, Trades Green, a guy that you've mentioned a bunch as a freak athlete. Obviously, if you guys don't know, played basketball for LSU as well. And again, I've heard you talk. He's the best athlete on the team. Four new starters on the offensive line after you lost Will Campbell, Emory Jones. You mentioned all the guys that were drafted. And the big question I think there is, do new faces lead to an improved run game? Because it was obviously one of the worst in the SEC. And it was a talking point for us every week, right? Is this the week LSU can run the football? Unfortunately, the answer, I feel like, never came as yes at any point last season. And at the running back spot, Caden Durham returns after a really good year. I don't think the running game struggling was because of anything he lacks. I think he can be a 1,000-yard rusher in this league. And you've also got the freshman Harlem Berry, who's catching lots of buzz as well. So, Blake, I throw all that at you. Just talk to me about this 2025 offense, what you're expecting from this group. The theme of this LSU football team, like you mentioned, a lot of new faces. That is the case on the offensive side, but fairly unfairly, Blake, it feels like all the eyeballs are going to go to Garrett Nussmeier under center.
I got to be real with you. For me, it has nothing to do with Garrett at the current moment. The reason it has nothing to do with Garrett is because Garrett can take a complete 180 on turnovers, and none of it matters because he doesn't have an offensive line that can protect him. Chris, the biggest thing coming out of LSU, and I've heard people on our media beat, I've heard national people talking about, oh, there's no way that they can be as bad. Bullshit. I mean, like, I think that when you say something like that, now they can be better. So hold on. They can be better. The problem is that you have no idea because you've never seen the 5 guys that are going to be run out there. You bring in Josh Thompson from Northwestern. You bring in Braylon Moore from Virginia Tech. I was at every spring practice. Neither one of them ran with the first team. You have no clue. Don't you dare come at me and try to tell me that you have any idea because you don't know because they did not go with the first team. So nothing matters around Garrett other than his offensive line. I think you know that you have the weaponry. Nick Anderson, if he's fully healthy, which Chris, by the way, Brian Kelly accidentally had to do this because of the accident that Nick Anderson got in, that he's been fully cleared. He got in a car accident. We did not know if he was cleared for fall practice day 1. So with that being said, he kind of had to say, I expect him to be there for fall camp and day 1. Okay, sounds good. Barry and Brown, Chris Hilton, who emerged after late in the season, Aaron Anderson, in my opinion, was your number 1 receiver. Rest in peace to Kyron Lacey, but was your number 1 wide receiver a year ago. None of that matters. None of that matters to me because, Chris, let's look at the last 5 national champions. Let's look at the teams that were competing for championships and what all of they did. All of them have one thing in common. They can run the football. So when you are unable to line up and run the ball, you aren't going anywhere. The excuses for Garrett, and I don't want to even call them excuses, but a big thing that hurt Garrett a year ago that no one can deny was that you didn't have a running game. Chris, in 2023, as an example, that defense was horrid. Everybody said LSU lost the national championship because of their secondary. They were 108th in the country as a secondary in 2023. Well, you turn to 2024, your run game was 108th in rushing. Nothing else mattered. So if that was the worst secondary in LSU history, was this the worst run game in LSU history? So you got to ask those questions. Chris, nothing else matters. I don't know what their starting 5 offensive line is going to be. Now, they went out and got the number 1 and number 2 interior offensive lineman in the country. And Carius Kern, which you better get very familiar with right now, dude benched 500. He's a true freshman. Somebody's getting beaten out. Somebody's getting beat. He's going to find his way to emerge. When you recruit at a high level dudes do great things. Derek Curiel. So when you do those level of things, this is what you expect if you hit on those guys. So, Chris, we could say this whole offensive segment is about the offensive line. If you can't run the ball, if you find yourself against South Carolina, Florida, who, by the way, go ahead. You go ahead and play with Florida, with Sapp and Caleb Banks and all of them. They play some really damn good defensive fronts. And if you get to Atlanta, you're going to face probably Texas or Georgia, which they're riddled with 5 stars. So I think it's got to start up front. can you find ways to run the football? But more or less, can you get easy yards? Chris, you couldn't even get the easy stuff. It's 3rd and 1 and you can't line up and get a yard. You don't deserve to win. And I think scheme played a part in that too. There's a couple of things with that. I could talk about the receivers, how great they're going to be. I could talk about Garrett, how good they're going to be. None of that matters until BK got into the end of the season and helped started calling plays. And people forget that. He was helping Joe Sloan in the run game. I don't think you can walk that back. So let's hypothetically act like this offensive line figures it out and they're just average. That's where the things for Garrett and the run game start getting a little bit different, and where I think, Chris, they're 10 times more explosive than they were a year ago. I did not agree with C.J. Daniels and Kyron Lacey in reference to you got 2 possession receivers, you need speed. All they got now is speed. I mean, that's what Garrett wants to do. He wants to push the ball down the field. If you're able to run the football, those guys have got to come up. And when you do that to Garrett, and Ole Miss did this, unfortunately, and it backfired on them. It's why they lost. When they came up in the box, Garrett made them pay. So when you look at Garrett and you look at everything around him, he's got the weaponry. I think Trey'Dez Green is the level of athlete at tight end that, Chris, in 15 years, 20 years, we're looking up and we're like, remember that crazy Cajun Blake Ruffino Italian that came in there and said, I think he's going to wear a gold jacket? He's that level of athlete. He is that special. 5-star level kid. They got dudes. That's why everybody's so high on LSU at the current moment. They got dudes. So the question becomes, can you protect number 13 or maybe number 18, depending on how the summer goes? There's a little hint to you. So let's find out what that offensive line can do first, Chris, before we start making determinations on how I feel about Garrett. But if we're going to talk about Garrett, the only thing I would say is Chris, BK's not wrong in the sense of he has an opportunity to do what 2 quarterbacks did before him in the second year. And no one really believed until my happy ass came and started running out here. I put $100 bet at plus 4,000 for Jaden Daniels to win a Heisman, thanks to FanDuel. So shout out to FanDuel. But, I mean, I'm just throwing it out. It's true. I did it live on air. I'm like, dude, y'all ain't seeing what I'm seeing. Chris, you're going to know pretty quickly. You're going to know really quickly. So if he doesn't have the guys around him that can protect, then we'll see. Also, I wish Louisiana had sports gambling with Joe Burrow. I would have put my entire mortgage on it. So regardless of all of that, I think he is going to take the next step. What is that next step, though? You know, I don't know what it is. I will tell you there are a couple things for Garrett that are off the field that mean more to me than on the field. We know his ability. I think he's matured. Hey, man, Chris, in every interview the last 2 weeks, the first thing he said is, listen, I worked on all of my turnovers. I mean, let's call it what it is. Now, Blake Ruffino got killed on social media, and you know this. I got killed saying you can't have 17 turnovers from your quarterback. It cannot happen. And I think the maturity level, Chris, and the working on his body and things like that are bigger to me than anything. Don't throw it into quadruple coverage. You're better than that. You know better than that, okay? So if he takes that next step and the offensive line gets better, and quite honestly, Joe Sloan, the offensive coordinator, has got to be better. The run schemes, look, I've been around football and offensive line play for a long time. I've been in those meetings. I don't understand what they're doing. You brought in Alex Atkins from Florida State. I hope he helps out. I hope BK helps out, but nothing else to me matters other than those big hog mollies up front. And you brought in some talented pieces. Let's see what they can do.
Blake, let's go to the other side of the football. That was the big talking point last year, obviously, like you mentioned, after coming off 2023, a historically bad defense, the Tigers. Blake Baker, year one as DC, his impact was felt immediately. Obviously, they look to try to take another step this season. Like we said, a lot of new faces. Jacoby and Guillory returns from injury on the interior defensive line. Ahmad Bro back as well. You mentioned the edge guys, Jack Pyburn, the Florida transfer, and Patrick Payton from Florida State. They man the edges, and you talked a lot about Pyburn and the impact he's made, and those guys catching a lot of buzz, even just coming out of spring. Whit Weeks, a.k.a. the Honky Badger, leading the linebacker room. I think another question yet again, and Blake, I know you can answer it. What in the world does LSU do with Harold Perkins? That was the riddle they could not solve a season ago. Certainly a guy with tons of talent, but curious how they utilize him this fall. And then a lot of new faces in the secondary, a lot of talent, but a lot of new faces led by Mansour Delane from Virginia Tech, to Marcus Cooley from NC State, and obviously a freshman in DJ Pickett that has been catching as much hype as any youngster in the SEC has been. So, Blake, all that being said, like I said, a lot of new faces yet again. Can this LSU defense take another step forward in year 2 of Blake Baker?
I think they certainly can. I think they're more talented than they were a year ago, especially at edge as a complete unit. Chris, I've said this ever since spring. I'll continue to push it. Either LSU is very bad at tackle, and they very well may be very bad at tackle, or they're pretty elite at edge. Either one of those two things are going to happen. And I think what they needed to do was get more physical. The problem with LSU defensively the last 3 years, now going into 4, is they got out physical. It wasn't the LSU brand of football. I mean, when Brian Kelly was at Notre Dame, outside of the Bama game where he got blown out in the national championship game, he said that he had to make a change on how they recruited. Because, listen, going out and getting the 5-star wide receiver and spending all of our – I say spending all of our money, but spending under the table money, which everybody did, and not going and getting the dudes up front, we're going to get killed that way. And Brian Kelly's teams, even though they lost, they never really got beat up on the offense and defensive lines. They didn't have the skill guys. It wasn't pretty. They didn't get the quarterback. It wasn't pretty. But they had the dudes. Why he had more offense and defensive linemen drafted than almost anybody outside of a guy by the name of Nick Saban. So I think that was pretty good. He was 2 in that. So I get to a point where, Chris, it all comes down to physicality, really, in the up front. Can this edge unit provide for you? I think a guy who was a top 50 recruit in Gabe Relaford, he was my spring player of the year. We do that every year. Hey, who's the best guy that stood out to you? It was Gabe Relaford at edge. But you went out and got Jamari Butler. You went from Nebraska. You went out and got Patrick Payton. You went out and got Jack Pyburn, who's brought a lot of intensity. I don't know if Jack Pyburn's ever going to record a tackle for us, but the intensity he brought this offseason was electric. So I think you are going to be better. Now, you brought in Sadir Mitchell from Texas, who, Chris, I didn't see anybody move his big ass. He's probably 370, just being generous. He might be more than that. He didn't get moved. So you get to a place where from a physicality standpoint, will LSU be better? The bottom line truth is that the LSU in the interior of their defensive line has been horrid. They've been god-awful. And every SEC loss, they've allowed 250 rush yards per game, per loss. You've gotten your ass whooped. So I don't know how much it's scheme more as it is that you just didn't have the Jimmies and Joes. And that's okay. But you went out and spent a lot of money to get Jimmies and Joes. So now you got to figure that out. Linebacker room as well. Chris, I really don't know what to make of the defense, because the truth of the matter is you may have 3 new starting defensive linemen. You're going to have a new starting linebacker. You might have 5 new DBs that are the same or are different. I mean, what do you want me to say about that? Maybe Ashton Stamps, who was there last year, battles and finds his way. Maybe DJ Pickett, the number 1 corner in the country, finds a way to start in week 1. I don't know. But what I do know is I think they're more talented, but talent doesn't always mean wins. Can they be a cohesive unit will be the question. Now, you asked about Harold Perkins. The star position, a.k.a. the slot, is where they've put him, a big box safety, if you will. They sent that position on blitzes 50% of the time last year. Pro Football Focus announced about 3 or 4 or 5 months ago. Chris, if you're sending him out to the quarterback, then that means he's going up against running backs and tight ends, which if he can beat tackles, he can beat a tight end. If he can beat a tackle, he can beat a running back. I don't know about Harold either, because I don't know what they're going to do with him. I haven't seen it yet with Blake Baker on the outside. So, Chris, I wish I had more answers for you. I have none. I legitimately have none. Let's see what happens. But what I did see in spring is that they dominated the offense. Chris, in 16 11 on 11 periods, they allowed 0 touchdowns. 0. That's how elite that edge unit was. Now, the safety room, they brought in A.J. Halsey from Houston, who, by the way, is a true freshman, ran down in Death Valley a guy by the name of Jaden Daniels. It's the only time I ever saw number 5 get tracked down. He got tracked down. Let me just say that again for everybody. He got tracked down. So I didn't see Bama do that. I didn't see Georgia do that. I didn't see, by the way, he had a hobbled ankle against Georgia. I didn't see teams in the SEC doing that. I saw him do it. So we'll see. Chris, they got a lot of talented pieces. But, man, they were lighting these offensive dudes up in spring. So we'll be out there Wednesday to see how the intensity level goes. I'm very high on them. I think they can be a top 30 unit based off of talent alone. If they do what I think that they can do in year 2, LSU can make a playoff. If everything remains the same offensively from a year ago, but they jump from the mid-60s to a top 30 defensive unit, they're going to a playoff because they're not going to lose to A&M. They're not going to lose a game like USC, not saying they lose to Clemson. I think they can make a playoff. The bottom line remains, though, is that you got to be a collective unit. And if teams continue to run the football on you, quarterbacks continue to run the football on you, you ain't going nowhere. You're going to be on the outside looking in. So a lot of pieces, man, but I don't think anybody until we start seeing them can make a full determination because A.J. Halsey might be your starting safety. No one's seen him in an LSU uniform before.
Blake, I know special teams is a facet of the game that doesn't get a ton of love, but I do want to mention it briefly. Damian Ramos returns at place kicker for the Tigers. You added Grant Chadwick from Middle Tennessee to take over punting duties after LSU, for those who maybe forgot, ranked 15th in the SEC in net punting in 2024. And I feel like special teams is something that LSU fans, and even those who aren't LSU fans, if you're talking LSU football, you better pay attention because you add Barryon Brown to your return game. If you haven't, again, paid attention to the last couple of years, that dude was an electric factory for Kentucky when it came to kickoff returns. Xavion Thomas, I know another option, maybe at the punt return spot. Maybe it's Barryon Brown with both. Talk about LSU special teams a bit, Blake. How much do you expect it to factor in, and what excites you? And are there any questions when it comes to this group?
Yeah, LSU had multiple kick return and punt returns for touchdowns last year without Barryon Brown, and he broke the SEC record in kick returns for touchdowns. So the biggest thing for them on special teams has nothing to do with personnel and everything to do with who they brought in. Ahmad Anand is a name that no one – it wasn't massive highlights. It wasn't massively reported. It wasn't something that everybody's like, oh, my God, they got a special teams guru. Well, he led Penn State to the most blocks, punt blocks, in the Big Ten and in the country 3 years ago. He goes to Texas Southern to become a running backs coach and special team coordinator. We had a 1,000-yard back and 800-yard back, and they were number one in the FCS, and guess what? Special teams. I think LSU might have found something here. Now, if you go, by the way, Ahmad Anand was at Baylor too. They were number 2 in the Big 12 in special teams. You have a guy with a track record. Let's see what he can do here. They got to be better at punting the football. I mean, they were so god-awful last year that it was embarrassing. So you brought in Chadwick. Let's see what happens there. But I think from a special team standpoint, the on-field analyst that now these guys can coach on field, Ahmad Anand is someone that I think everybody needs to kind of like, hey, man, this dude was at Penn State when they blocked kicks against Ohio State, punts against Ohio State, things like that, where what is his scheme? Can he get Harold Perkins? Does he get a guy who's a spelled back like Harlan Berry to come off the edge and block a punt? I don't know. But I know he's done it in the Big Ten. I know he's done it at other places. Can he come into the SEC and do that will be a big deal. But kicking game's got to get better. Chris, think about the A&M game. I mean, ultimately, that's what lost you the game. Right, you had. I mean, if you got 9 points off field goals, you start separating yourself. Marcel Reed's got to throw the football. He can't. You don't have enough time. So, there's that. I don't know if Damian Ramos doesn't get beat out by Aaron Burrell. I saw Aaron Burrell in camp make a 59-yard field goal. Okay, with pressure. Damian Ramos can't spell 59, much less hit one. So, I mean, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but Aaron Burrell's got a cannon of a leg. So, I think there could be some shakeups there. I guess let's see how it all plans out. But I am pretty excited about Ahmad Anand, the new special teams analyst.
So, Blake, when we look at this 2025 LSU Tigers football team, for what it's worth, 7 starters returning from last year, 3 on offense, 4 on defense, obviously in this transfer portal era of college football. I don't know that number is quite as significant as it used to be when especially you think about all of the new pieces LSU added from the transfer portal that are going to make an immediate impact and a big impact of that. I want to look at the 2025 schedule really quickly, Blake, and get your thoughts because, not all schedules are built equally in this conference. Certainly there's some that are more manageable than others.
Tell the Big Ten.
Certainly it gets real right out of the gate. Like we referenced earlier, you are at Clemson in a night game. Brian Kelly has already made sure to add some fuel to the fire, calling it Death Valley Junior. But it doesn't matter the offseason talking points. This is a massive game for LSU in regards to just getting the season started off on the right foot, getting the monkey off your back that is you haven't won a season opener since 2019. And I know you'd agree. It's not a college football playoff eliminator, but if you lose it, we obviously understand.
You got to run the table.
Your margins for error are pretty darn slim at that point. When you look at the conference slate, Blake, some big games at home at Death Valley against Florida, South Carolina, obviously Texas A&M. That'll be one that wink, wink, you might see yours truly at. Arkansas comes to town. And then the road trips are really interesting too. At Ole Miss early on. You do come to Nashville. How about that? At Alabama is certainly a game in Bryant-Denny that needs no type of hype or hoopla, if you will. And then you close out the season at Oklahoma. And what are the Sooners going to be? So, Blake, I say all that. When you look, and you've looked at this 2025 schedule, I know a ton, but when you look at it, how do you feel like it shapes up for the Tigers? Is it conducive to them winning 10-plus games and making a run to the playoff?
Well, if you get through the first month, and I'm throwing Clemson in there because it's August the 30th, okay? Even if you get to a situation, Chris, where you're 4-1, either you lose to Clemson or you lose to Florida or you lose to Ole Miss, whichever one you lose to, I kind of feel like you set yourself up in a really good spot because you get to a place where you got a bye week after Ole Miss, and then you have South Carolina coming into town. So you get to take a little bit of a breath, right? You get to regroup. If you're able to get through South Carolina and then Vanderbilt, which you got one of them at home, I think Vandy on the road, and look, I know that you're a Diego Pavia truther, but I get to a place where, Chris, I do think it can be manageable if you start off the season off on a good foot, right? If you go 4-1, hell, you go 5-0, I do think you set yourself up. But that Ole Miss game, let's say you lose to Clemson. That Ole Miss game, I think it's September 27th, whatever it is.
Yeah.
You go on the road. You haven't had a lot of success there against Lane Kiffin on the road. Then you really set yourself up. But Chris, that whole month schedule, you're gonna know everything that you need to know about LSU. Let's call it what it is. You're gonna know more than you need to know. But if you get there and you got South Carolina, I don't see South Carolina coming in here and winning. Sorry, I don't. Lenore Sellers by himself can do it. We've seen college quarterbacks do this before. He can do it. But I don't see you losing to Vanderbilt. I don't see you losing to A&M at home. But then you got Bama, and then you got Oklahoma on the road. Chris, that's where I think that the season ends or begins, right? Bama, it's either going to end or it's going to begin. Because I don't think Arkansas has the talent. Western Kentucky, yeah, they're going to come in here and really beat us. Okay, let's go. But then you go on the road. What is John Mateer the last weekend of the regular season? So it is manageable to some extent, but the front stretch of this is brutal. The good news is that you got Florida at home, you got South Carolina at home, you got A&M at home, you got Arkansas at home. Those are the games that you can win. But the thing is Chris, I can make the argument that your four toughest opponents on this schedule, Oklahoma, Alabama, Ole Miss, and Clemson, are all on the road. So that's where when you look at this and everybody says, oh, well, LSU doesn't have Texas, they don't have Georgia. I'd rather take Texas at home than some of these other games on the road. Or, so, and I think Texas might win the whole damn thing. But at least I can get you at home. Again, man, it's a brutal stretch. Now go look at the quarterbacks you face. Diego Pavia might be in the quarterback rankings of this, and I mean this sincerely. He might be the worst quarterback in the SEC that you face from a talent standpoint. I mean, I'm being dead serious. So again, if that's the lowest level of QB that you're facing off with, of course, anything can happen. So a lot of people have high hopes that this team could go 10-2, but I don't think they've looked into it. It's a brutal stretch, man. Florida's not a walkover. I mean, they're not. Ole Miss is not going to be a walkover. So we'll see, man. That first month, that first 5 weeks is going to tell you everything I think you need to know.
Blake, kickoff just around the corner as we close out here. Like you mentioned, fairly or unfairly, even with that slate, that is the expectation to get to double-digit wins, get to the college football playoff. It feels like it's now or never for Brian Kelly. So many storylines surrounding this team from, we mentioned already, Garrett Nussmeier on the offensive side, defensively, all the new pieces, and trying to take a step forward defensively. Blake, I simply ask you this. If LSU is going to get to 10-plus wins, if they're going to, SEC title game aside, because unfortunately with the way the playoff is, that's really not the end-all, be-all anymore. It's more about getting to the playoff. If they're going to do that, if they're going to meet the expectations that I know so many LSU fans have for them, that, heck, I know, Blake, you have for them. For you, what is the key or keys that this LSU team, what do they have to do to make that happen?
Go 1-0 against Clemson. Be 1-0. Because momentum, confidence, because then you got Louisiana Tech after that, and then you got Florida coming into town. I don't think Florida's coming in here and winning. Chris, can you imagine being undefeated going into Ole Miss? Could you imagine having only one loss going into Bama? I mean, could you imagine that you got a potential playoff eliminator against Oklahoma? You got to be 1-0. Bottom line, I know people keep saying, Blake, you always say that. Yeah, don't lose to Florida State. Don't lose to USC. Don't lose these other teams.
So
Chris.
you, Blake, not to cut you off, but you do look at the Clemson game as a playoff eliminator.
Because of how many good quarterbacks that you face off, I mean, it's not an ultimate eliminator. You could go, I mean, Chris, if I'm not mistaken, you can beat Florida, you can beat Ole Miss, you can beat South Carolina, Vandy, A&M. I'm not going to throw Bama in there. You can beat Arkansas, you can beat Oklahoma. I mean, for argument's sake, you can beat – no one has any clue who Ty Simpson is. I'm sorry, they don't. You saw him throw 37 passes in college football. You have no clue. So stop. So what is Ty Simpson? So, I mean, again, if I'm looking at it from the preseason standpoint, yeah, in a lot of regards, because then you only have one slip up, Chris. And with all the new pieces that you have, I mean, look, man, you hired mercenaries. And Florida State can happen to you in either way. Is it going to happen to you like it did in 23? Or is it going to happen like it did to you last season where they went 2-10? LSU ain't going 2-10. But you get my point. Culture can easily fracture if you start losing. You go out there 1-0 and you win and you beat Clemson, you're on the right trajectory. Get to 4-0 going to Ole Miss. That team's going to be playing with their hair on fire. You got to go 1-0. I mean, it's a big deal. Clemson went 0-3 against the SEC last year. You can't beat LSU and say, well, they beat LSU, though. Can't do that. Can't happen. You got to go out there and take it to them. With all due respect, you got to go out there and punch them in the fucking mouth. You can't keep playing this bullshit pity-patty stuff and try to be fancy. Chris, the first play that I'm running, if I'm LSU, I'm doing a zone read with Garrett Nussmeier, and I'm telling him to pull it. Run. Get all the pressure off of you. Make them respect you. Chris, if I'm Garrett Nussmeier, I'm pulling it, and I'm running right at TJ Parker, and I'm hitting him right in the fucking chin strap is what I'm doing. Let's go take it to somebody. Stop this little fancy pity-pat bullshit. Let's go take it to somebody. Because TJ Parker ain't going to want to do that every single game. He ain't going to want to do it every down. Go take it to somebody. Your back's up against the wall. Your head coach's back's up against the wall. Want to find out how much they love Brian Kelly? Go into Clemson and lay an egg and find out. So, yeah, in a lot of ways, go punch somebody in the mouth. Literally. Chris, Notre Dame, a lot of people talk crap about, myself included, because I have a co-host. But I talk shit on purpose. It's by rule I have to. They were punching dudes literally in the mouth. Want to talk about intensity? Go knock somebody's block off. Do a crackback. Get to 15 yards. Who gives a Rudy Poo? Knock his block off. It's like Rocky and Rocky 2. Go knock his block off, Rocco. I mean, go knock somebody's block. I'm serious. You go out there and you take it to Clemson and all the, they're going to win a national title hype for them, it comes spiraling down. Oh, yeah, you thought you were good. This was the year that Dabo comes back. We snatched that shit from you. So, yeah, in a lot of ways, you got to go take it to them. Sorry I'm getting fired up, but it's the truth. There's no more pity-pat bullshit. You got to go take it to them.
Well, I'm officially ready to run through a brick wall, Blake. So
I mean, I'm just telling you.
It's going to be a long next, 33 days till kickoff after that speech. But certainly, that game is –
Brian Kelly needs to bring me in for a motivational conference.
I'd agree. Well, let's just play. I'll DM him this clip. We'll just play it. Well, heck, we'll post this clip. You can use it. Do whatever you want with it. Blake Ruffino.
You remember when you ever seen the replacements? Very quickly, ever seen the replacements? Remember when Shane Falco comes back at halftime and they're like drop kicking dudes like Hulk Hogan? I'm running the Statue of Liberty. Literally, play one.
Send a message.
Kick somebody in the head. What they going to do?
Set the tone. Set the tone. Why not? Blake Ruffino, AYS Sports, the best in the business when it comes to talking all things LSU. Also, his National College Ball Ruffino and Joe show. Fantastic show they do, essentially on the daily, talking all things college football, not just SEC. Blake, as always, man, I appreciate you taking the time. Let folks know where they can check out all y'all's great work.
Yeah, I don't know when Ruffino and Joe show does this, but we'll be going an extra day this year. So Sunday through Wednesday. So Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday for all of those who don't know the days of the week. AYS Sports, Chris, this is the week starts off, we're here. So practice reports, we'll be out there grinding, ready to go. So football's here, baby. AYS Sports, wherever you're on socials, and it's going to be fun, man.
And make sure you tune in to your point as well.
Oh, yeah.
If you enjoyed this conversation, more of Blake and I talking all things college football, college sports, and probably some other nonsense as well that we throw in there. So anyways, Blake, I appreciate you taking the time, man. Always a pleasure. Look forward to chopping it up with you on To Your Point later this week, and excited for kickoff, my man.
Yep, me too. I was going to say something funny, but I don't think it's the time for it.
We'll save it for tomorrow.
We'll save it for tomorrow.